About myself, I'm going to tell you about the county. I'm also going to tell you about how we can win and why we're going to win. I know there's a lot of concern about Dallas County turning blue, beige blue. If you believe all that liberal media, yes, we are doomed. But I don't believe it because I think facts speak for themselves. I grew up here, went to Hillcrest High School, started off to go to North Texas State University, now known as UNT, shows you when I went there. Thought I'd be a dentist, decided I really wanted to be a business person. So went out and started my first business. I'm what you call a serial entrepreneur. I started about a dozen businesses in my career in all different fields. One of them was in plastics. I joked, I saw the movie The Graduate, and I thought Dustin Hoffman was supposed to go into plastics. It was good for me, because I really liked Dustin. It ended up in the technology business in the early 90s. So it's been the gamut. I know what it is to run a business. I know how to start it, how to deal with employees, how to deal with budgets, how money is made. And for me, it was the old-fashioned way. I didn't know about handouts or subsidies or any of those things. In today's business, if you call up somebody in Washington, they'll give you $500 million interest-free. You don't even have to pay it back to start your business. I sold my last business in 2004, and I knew I would go on to the next business, but in the interim, my friends came to me and they said, Natinsky, you're unemployed right now, and we need somebody to run for Dallas City Council that understands business, that understands how to make the right policy decisions. And I took them up on it. Later, of course, I was reflecting on my civics teacher in high school who told me that one day, Natinsky, government is going to be important to you, and you're not paying attention to it. Of course, as soon as I got elected, I wanted to call her up and tell her I are now governor. I served on the Dallas City Council for 6 years. I think for me, it was a really both eye-opening and good experience. When you're sitting there, you've got the ability to make decisions that affect 1.2 million people that live in the city of Dallas. And you have to make decisions that serve everybody. And sometimes they're not easy decisions. They're tough ones to make. You deal with a multi-billion-dollar budget, you deal with borrowing money, paying back money, looking for sources, and you deal with things as mundane as why wasn't my garbage picked up, or my son got a speeding ticket, can't you fix it? But coming out of the private sector, I really view the city as a big business, a $2 billion a year business, and it should be run that way, within its budget constraints and doing what it needed to do. Public safety, the utilities, picking up the garbage, the parks, the libraries, and the things like that, and stay out of all the other things that many people want. I call them nanny laws and nanny ordinances that always seem to filter up to the council's agenda. So for me, a lot of people ask, why would you want to go down to the county and serve as county judge and deal with the likes of John Wiley Price and the others down there? Well, I consider dealing with the 14 colleagues on the city council, not all of whom you might imagine saw eye to eye with me. In fact, very few of them saw eye to eye with me. That's a training ground. I think once you understand how it works and you bring your private sector experience to it, it makes it a lot easier. I think county government, in most people's minds, is skipped over. They're very heavily involved in their local politics. Then, in my view, they tend to skip over to state politics. Who's their House rep, who's their senator, get involved down in Austin and things like that, and then they get involved at the federal level with federal politics. The county government can affect you, and you pay as much taxes to the county as you do to these other entities. And so, out of sight, out of mind. When I grew up, we had good county government. We had the likes of Lee Jackson down there that knew how to run the county in a good fiscal way. The last few county judges we've had don't quite meet that criteria. The first Democrat, Jim Foster, there was a Democrat running. He went down to the last 15 minutes, signed up, and guess what? Darn if he didn't get elected, because that was the year the Democrats swept everybody, out of office. Then we had our current county judge, who was supported from Waxahachie because even the Democrats didn't like Jim Foster. So they went to Waxahachie. It's like, here's a county with 2.5 million people in it. A lot of business people, a lot of civic-minded people, a lot of, people who have been engaged, and they couldn't find somebody to run. They had to go down to Waxahachie to get someone. In my view, the county has just gone downhill since then. What you don't realize about the county is while you hear about how well run the county itself from a fiscal perspective might be, the They don't issue any more debt. They're in the process of paying off their debt and trying to get to a debt-free status. It's going to take them over 18 years to do that. But what you don't realize is that the county government is responsible for organizations like Parkland Hospital, who not only just issued almost $900 million in additional debt, raised your county hospital taxes by 3% to help pay for that debt and to finance an institution that, from my perspective, is slowly going out of business. I think we have to get back control of it. There will be, myself, when I get elected, and Mike Cantrell, and you say, well, gee whiz, there's 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. You're going to get outvoted every time. Well, you know something? If we leave Mike down there by himself, he'll continue to get outvoted. He won't have an ally. And the other thing is the county judge sets the agenda for the county commissioner's court. By controlling the agenda, you can control a lot of the silliness that goes on down there. Voter ID is an example. I don't know if you're aware of this. The county is spending $275,000 of your taxpayer money to intervene and try to overthrow voter ID. Okay? It's already been to the Supreme Court. We didn't like the decision on Obamacare, but we sure like the decision on voter ID. They've gone to the aid of the Democrat Party to help try to get that overturned. I don't understand why it's legal, but I have talked to the Attorney General's office, and yes, if they have the votes, they can do it. So what you have is you have 3 Democrats that ended up voting or 4 Democrats that ended up voting to spend taxpayer money on something that to me is frivolous. Now the proof of the pudding in that is, we just went through this last election. There's been all this rhetoric that we're repressing the people who can't afford and don't have, and voter turnout's going to be dismal. I've also heard that 250,000 people in Dallas County, okay, a quarter of our registered voters that do not have voter ID. So the state went out, did all this free registration, gave you a free birth certificate to do all that. Anybody remember reading in the paper how many people signed up for their free voter ID? Take a guess. Well, a little higher than 2. 41 people took advantage of this free program. Now, you would think Democrats understand the word free. They would flock down if there were really all those unregistered voters that were not dead, because the dead people can't quite get to the polls. The irony of it is we had one of the highest voter turnouts that we've had in an election of that type. So my attitude today is voter ID increases voter participation. And I think we're on the right track with that. The other is Obamacare. And if you haven't read, our current county judge is leading the charge to get as many people, both legal and illegal, signed up for Obamacare. He announced when he filed the other day in the paper, this to me as someone who is trying to run against an incumbent, and that's tough, in a county that's going to be a close race. When he announced the 2 key components of his re-election campaign are going to be overturning voter ID and enrolling more people in Obamacare. I even wanted to thank the liberal Dallas Morning News for printing the article about this, because that is a good thing to be running against. If those are the only 2 things that he can find that he's going to champion down there, he needs to be replaced. When I was on the Dallas City Council, we were faced with tough budget years. How do we get more tax dollars in to provide the level of services that the citizens of the city need? And the way to do that is by growing the economy and reducing the tax rate and bringing the same amount of tax dollars in. I unfortunately read where the county was so proud that they were not going to have a tax increase this year because their tax rate high. But you know something? You all got a tax increase. You know why? Because your home values are coming back up. Home values in Dallas County, depending who you read, have increased 10 to 13%. So effectively, you're paying 10 to 13% more in taxes this year than you paid last year, yet they're very pleased with the fact that they didn't raise the tax rate. So you have to be careful about how politicians kind of parse their words down there. I think we can be more active in how we grow the economy of Dallas County. Right now, Dallas County does not engage in any of the cities in the region, any of those 26 cities. When someone wants to relocate here, I was involved in relocating AT&T to Dallas. I was involved in bringing Comerica Bank. They got out by the skin of their teeth because they left Detroit before it went bankrupt. Tenet Healthcare and other big corporations to Dallas. And on every one of those moves, we went to the county and we said, we need some help. Can you help us in some way to attract this? make it a package so that if they want to come to our region versus somewhere else. And in each of those instances, we got turned out. That's not our job. Well, it is our job because county taxes that are paid by the businesses and everybody else in this county are important. If you grow the size of the pie, we can all have reduced taxes. I'm going to touch on Parkland for a moment. You know, we've become the hole in the donut that provides taxpayer-supported health care to those who can't go anywhere else. Now, I believe there are probably people out there, I know there are people that need it. I mean, they're in a circumstance where they can't afford any other way to get health care. And that's why health care was put under the county government, to have a county hospital that could serve those who really need it. What we've become is we've become the sort of dumping ground for those who live illegally and for all the surrounding counties. I have to pick on the Collin counties and the Ellises, but they all closed their public hospitals and said, you know what? If you live in Collin County and you need medical care, go to Dallas. They'll give it to you for free, and we won't even reimburse them. I'm not sure that if anybody was in business running Parkland that they would let the number of people that come there not pay the bills and not do anything and just continue to serve it. The irony of all this is we've now got Obamacare. Nobody likes it. You know, we'd like to get rid of it. We're not giving up on it as conservative Republicans. But right now, people are signing up for it. Of course, not very many people are signing up. Today they announced that they've reached the grand plateau of 106,000 people that signed up on a national basis. To quote the reporter this morning, not quite the level that the president wanted to get. Excuse me. Well, I did the quick math. You know what that comes out to? Divide it out. Divide 100,000 people by the 50 states and everything. You end up with a minuscule number. 100 people a day in the state of Texas signed up. Now we've got 26 million people in the state of Texas. All they could find was 100 of us that they wanted to sign up. Okay? But we've got our $900 million Parkland that we're getting ready to open. If you had health care, Tim, you were indigent before, you were unemployed, you know, you went in, you signed up for Obamacare. I have two questions. Where are you going to get the deductible to pay? Nobody answers that. Second, now that you have health care, this wonderful bronze, gold, titanium plan, where are you going to go? No! You now have health insurance. You're going to go to Medical City, Presbyterian, Methodist. Why are you going to go to a hospital to serve those that don't have insurance? So I think the reason that Clay Jenkins is pushing people to sign up for Obamacare, and Parkland is on the verge of instituting an insurance, he's shaking his head, he knows what I'm talking about, an insurance program to cover the deductible for those that can't pay it, to force them to come back to Parkland, so they can get the federal dollars to help pay off the debt to keep Parkland full. So it's just a vicious cycle, and it's not good for us, you know, as taxpayers. Now, last thing is, how are we going to win? Everybody says, why would, you know, a smart guy like you go down there and run against the incumbent, you know, well-funded and all that? If you do the demographics on Dallas County, we've got enough Republican voters. If we can just get them to the polls, if we can get them to vote a straight ticket, I know it's abhorrent to Republicans who thinks that you would do that, but to, you know, steal a line from Wade Emmerich, to county chairman, you know, better to vote for a Republican that you don't know than a Democrat that you don't want, okay? Or just go all the way down like I do. I refuse to vote straight party, but I check all the boxes all the way down. We have between a 30 and 40% drop-off in Republican voting at the top of the ticket versus the bottom of the stage. So if we can get the people who voted at the top to go all the way down, go to the polls, we can win. It won't be by a huge margin. It doesn't work out that way. But Wade Emmerich only lost by a handful of votes when he ran. Okay. I think times have changed. There are even Democrats that don't like what's going on in the Democratic Party and the administration. So we'll get a little bit of crossover.
And you have more name recognition. I'm very excited.
Thank you, Heather.
I mean, he does have more name recognition than Wade. So that's great. Well, that's important.
And I think that's an important point. I mean, Wade's a good friend of mine. He was a city council member I knew from Cedar Hill, Texas. A lot of people didn't even know where Cedar Hill was. He ran a good campaign. He came within a handful of thousand votes of winning it. Clay Jenkins won with less than 50% because the Republican candidate, Wade, and the Libertarian candidate got more than 50%. So had we not had a Libertarian, I hope I don't offend any Libertarians, but when it's time to get to the polls, we need to set our super conservative, our Libertarian, and all that stuff aside and vote the Republican ticket. Otherwise, we're going to get Clay Jenkins again down there. The last thing I'll tell you is that a lot of people were really upset with the whole thing about Bruce Sherbert. Okay? And I don't know if you all know this. The reason Bruce Sherbert lost his job is because Clay Jenkins came in and changed the rules on a committee that manages the administrator of elections. He changed the composition because he had the votes. So we have the opportunity to undo that. Because if we can get another vote down there, we can control that committee. We can get rid of Tony Pippin's pool. And we can bring in somebody who is qualified to run in an impartial and fair manner the elections for Dallas County. So there's a lot on the line. And if we leave Dallas County Democratic, it's going to erode into Collin County. It's going to be like a cancer. Next thing you know, we're going to lose Texas. And then you know what's going to happen when we lose Texas? We cannot elect a Republican president unless we got Texas. So there's a lot on the line. It's all resting on my shoulders. So I'd appreciate your support. I left some push cards around. We're going to do questions later on. I need you to go to the website. A no-cost thing. Check off that you endorse me, you support me, you want a yard sign, you walk your neighborhood or whatever. And then the one that's a little bit more painful, I hate to tell you, and I'm not bashful, campaigns cost money to run. Those little push cards cost 24 cents a piece. And it costs money for yard signs and everything else that we have to do. This is probably going to be $1 million race. I don't expect anybody in the room to write me that check of that size. But the $10 and the $15 and the $50 and $100 do add up. And I would appreciate your support. So thank you all very much.
Before we go to Tom, I forgot to ask our elected officials and any candidates in the room if you'd like to stand and say your name. And
I come to the events like this, so hopefully I'll get the same response after I'm done talking. So I appreciate the support that I get from people. When I come to Coppell, talk to most of y'all, and I won't belabor some of the points that I make when I come to meetings. I think my opponent was supposed to be here tonight. She might be in the race, might not be in the race. We'll find out soon enough. I officially filed for my race, running against Craig Watkins as District Attorney of Dallas County. So that happened today. I'm proud to say I'm an official candidate for the District Attorney of Dallas County, and I'm ready to make a change. Now, y'all are in the wrong club if y'all don't know anything about Craig Watkins and why we need to change. And Ron's already mentioned a number of reasons to why we need to be county judge. And he and I are working together basically at all the meetings, going, seeing each other everywhere we go. We've become fast friends in terms of campaigning. But we are both on the same mission. Craig Watkins won the race 4 years ago in 2010 with less than 1% of the vote of Dallas County. 5,100 and change votes in Dallas County. He won the election. My good friend Danny Clancy was running for the job at the time and came very, very close. We weren't sure who was going to win until late in the night. I attended the Republican Watch Party that evening. I was there with all my other friends who were running for office at that time. And as you might have seen in the news, I was also fired later that week for being a Republican, for standing on my principles, standing for the things that I believed in. Now that ended up being a blessing in disguise because I've been working as a defense lawyer ever since, and I've gotten to experience and handle the types of cases that a district attorney is in charge of. So when we talk about the district attorney, we always talk about those big capital murder cases you might be reading about in the paper. I will point out, he's not trying anyone. Here's a lawyer, here's a man who stood and said he wanted to change Dallas County and be the lawyer for Dallas County. And when it comes to trying those cases, when it comes to putting somebody on death row, putting somebody in prison for a long time, he's not the one doing it. He doesn't know how. He's only tried one case that we've been able to verify in his career as a lawyer. Now, I've tried hundreds of cases. I've tried cases as a prosecutor. I've tried cases as a defense lawyer. He doesn't do that. He is there for himself. We all know that. We see him on TV. We always see him having press conferences when he's getting somebody out of jail. You never see him having press conferences for the victims of crimes. You never see him having press conferences in terms of telling Dallas County voters that you can feel safe. That you can feel safe because I'm on the job. I would venture to guess that anybody sitting here eating their dinner doesn't feel very safe with Craig Watkins on the job. If you've ever heard him talk, you know he's not the brightest individual, and he got there by sheer luck. Let's be honest. 2006, all the Republicans were swept out, and you got some bad politicians who got in. There's no question about that, and he was one of them. And I'll give credit where credit is due. He deserves to get some credit for hitting out of the ballpark, taking the credit of a Republican initiative to get people out of prison. That was started under the previous administration, and Craig Watkins took credit for it, ran with it. Hey, they loved him for it. New York Times, Colbert Report. He went all over touting himself and how great he is and how fantastic he is for letting people out of prison. That was a Republican initiative that he took over, and he took credit for it. Now, you can hit a grand slam in the first inning, but you got to play 9 innings, and we're right at year 8. And so the game's about to come to an end, and we're going to pull it out. We're going to pull out a victory. And Ron already mentioned, we're dangerously close. There's a reason why Clay Jenkins and Craig Watkins are pushing voter ID. If you come between winning and losing by 5,000 votes, and we factor that maybe there might be a couple thousand votes that are lost, not from people not having ID, but from people mailing in ballots for dead people, mailing in ballots for other people that didn't vote the way that they were expected to, then yeah, Craig Watkins and Clay Jenkins have a lot riding on spending your taxpayer dollars to file a lawsuit on behalf of Dallas County to fight voter ID. Now, I'm a lawyer. I went to law school, so I like to talk, and I like to question things. I like to argue. My wife and I met in law school, and we argue on a regular basis, but all in good fun. So I question how Craig Watkins can think that Dallas County itself has a stake in the fight. And mark my words, the district judge will at some point in time throw out Dallas County's claims. And so who will be left paying the bills? Dallas County. Even though there'll be nothing there for us as citizens of Dallas County. So that will happen, I can guarantee you that. And in terms of the election, that's why they're scared. That's why Ron mentioned we have the best chance of taking back Dallas County in terms of those races. I ran last time as, I would say, a warm-up race. I ran for District 4 bench, John Crusoe's old bench. I was here, I came out, I campaigned here as well to learn about the process, and we knew we were going to have a hard time with President Obama on the ticket. So another number that y'all should consider. President Obama ran in Dallas County 2 elections, and between elections lost 4% of his support. You think, that's not a lot, not a whole lot. Well, for President Obama, it amounted to 32,000 vote loss in Dallas County, a blip. If Craig Watkins loses 4% of his support in the next election, he'll lose over 8,000 votes. Now, he only won by 5,100. He loses 8,000 just by losing 4% of his support. Now, if you've been reading the newspaper, if you're at all an educated voter, you know that Craig Watkins has been doing nothing but tripping over himself since he got in that office. So it's not hard to point out all the things he's been doing wrong, and indicting people as political favorites to billionaires, probably one of them. And he hasn't been doing very well in that job. So is he going to lose 4%? You bet. Talk to your Democratic friends. We all have them. We pray for them. But talk to them and see if they'll vote for Clay Jenkins. See if they'll vote for Craig Watkins. And I can almost guarantee you that it would be hard-pressed to find a person who's educated, who chooses to be a Democrat, and who chooses to vote for those 2 guys. So keep that in mind. Now, I ran for judge. I was down ballot. So when Ron talks about being down ballot, let's picture this for the next election. We've got a lot of stuff going on in the state. Ron and I go way after everybody, after the governor, the lieutenant governor, the state reps, the district judges, all that kind of stuff comes the county races. That's when we come into play. So in terms of the ballot, we're going to need the back page. We're going to need the hope and pray that people like yourselves go down ballot and vote for us. Because we have to be found in the list of people who are going to be there. So in terms of getting that support, we need you all to follow through on that. Now, I was the last person on the ballot, basically, in the last election. I got 2,000 to 3,000 more votes than any of the other Republicans running in Dallas County. The only people who beat me in terms of votes were Ted Cruz and Mitt Romney, and I got a higher percentage of the vote because I was so far down ballot. More votes, get further down ballot, so overall votes were less, and I got a higher percentage. And I ran against a wonderful friend of mine who I worked with at the district attorney's office, and she ran as a Democrat. She was a black female. And yet I somehow still managed, white Republican guy, to get 2,000 to 3,000 more votes than anybody else. Now, how do we do that? How do we get that? It's by running a clean campaign, by running on the issues of integrity, ability, and leadership. We know that Craig Watkins has no integrity. He's willing to sell out his office. Corrupt Craig, as I like to call him. Every decision he makes is with the basis of what can I do to further my own career, what can I do to further my own family's financial benefits, and what can I do to further myself. It's not with you guys in mind. He doesn't have that integrity. He doesn't have the ability, as I already mentioned, he's only tried in one case maybe. I'm board certified in criminal law. It should offend you that the district attorney in Dallas County is not certified in criminal law. I'm the only candidate who will be. So take that for what it's worth. I've been tested. I've had to go to trial. I've had to do all these things to prove my worth in terms of running someplace like the district attorney's office. Now I know some people look at me and go, Tom, you're kind of young, and I wish that was a good thing for a lot of people, but for a lot of people they're concerned about it. So let me point this out to you. I like to say that I'm an old soul. I was born in communist Poland, and I came here to the United States when I was 6 years old. So I remember waiting in line for bread and meat. Okay? I know what communism does. I know what socialism does to a country, which is why I adamantly oppose it. And I came over here when Reagan was president, so God bless the man, I love everything Republican. And I feel like I owe something to this country. And so I've done things to try to help my family, and I've tried to help my friends and the people of this country for the blessings that I've got. Now, y'all got some stuff on your table. My family, it's a beautiful picture. Those people were not hired. Those are actually the woman who agreed to marry me and the children she bore me. Okay? And I was there for all of them. So in terms of the blessings that I've gotten from this country, I owe a lot. And I became a reservist with the United States Air Force. I'm a JAG officer. I'm a captain in the United States Air Force. And so I give a little bit of time every year to that. My grandfather fought in World War II, so hopefully I'm living up to so much of his legacy and him being my hero. And I've gotten to do that here in America. My family started with nothing when we came here. We shopped at Goodwill. We lived in a bad part of Mesquite. Most of Mesquite now. But I love Mesquite, and I grew up there. It's my hometown, and we had nothing. My mom worked at the Wise chip potato factory. I don't know if you're familiar with those. Y'all remember those? But she would burn her fingers putting chips in boxes so that y'all would have them fresh at the store in the morning. Working nights. My dad installed cable, TV, in people's houses. They had to get up in attics in the middle of the Texas summers to do that. I know what it means to do hard work. I know what a hard life is. And so I hope my age isn't a deterrence to you. I hope that my experience, my abilities, the things that I've done convinces you that I'm still the right person for the job. So in terms of ability, Craig Watkins doesn't hold a candle to pretty much anybody running for this office, and I think any one of y'all here would do a better job. But in terms of being a criminal lawyer for Dallas County, he can't compare to my experience. And not just experience in terms of criminal. The district attorney has to do juvenile cases, CPS removal cases, civil cases, represents the county in lawsuits, represents elected officials in lawsuits. Those are all things that I've had experience doing as a defense lawyer and going around to different places in Texas. I've got cases in Montague County, Collin County, Rockwall County. I see what works. I get it. I can look at different places and tell us what's going to work well in Dallas County and how can we translate that idea to Dallas County. I work with judges of both parties. I work with prosecutors of both parties. When's the last time you heard Craig Watkins working with anybody? So in terms of leadership, Dallas County is at a lack of leadership. We know that. We see that on the news every day. I've had training in leadership. I've had training with the Air Force. I've had training going through the district attorney's office. I've had training coming up as a lawyer. I've had training in terms of, again, mentioning the things that I do and working with other people in other counties to know what's good. Dallas County has a drain of leadership. We don't have the quality of people. And you see that when Craig Watkins is going toe-to-toe with the commissioners. You see them fighting. You see them arguing. You see people who don't have the knowledge, who don't have the experience, and don't have the ability to lead. You can go to the district attorney's office today and see the people who are working as assistant district attorneys and see how they act. They act entitled, they act rude, they act like they know what they're doing, yet never try any cases, yet never move the cases like they're supposed to. And that comes from the top down. Their leadership is hardly there. Their leadership refuses subpoenas when he's ordered in court. He doesn't show up when a judge is ordered. And a little bit on that case. Craig Watkins was found in contempt for not answering questions when it came to prosecuting a man as a political favoritism. A Democrat judge found him in contempt and found the case to be dismissed because she felt that Craig Watkins had indicted a person, charged him with a first-degree felony case, and charged him with a crime, all to help a political donor. Now that man was Alamo III, he could afford some good attorneys. Well, what happens when you cross paths and he does that to you? Are you going to have the millions of dollars to hire the best attorneys to challenge that case? I think that everybody here would say that we want somebody who's got integrity, who's got ability, who's got leadership. And I mentioned how we can win that a little bit. We've talked a little bit about that. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was expecting my opponent, I was hoping my opponent would be here. I've heard that she's going to be my opponent. Let me rephrase that. Susan Hawkins said that she was going to be into the race and resigned her bench. She's a Democrat who switched parties and has said that she's going to be running, and I have every indication that she will. So I wanted to briefly mention that. And the flyers that I've left on your tables mention that as well, mention why I think that I'm the better candidate in terms of this. I want y'all to consider this. Let's suppose for a second that my race and Ron's race are the only races that win in Dallas County as Republicans. And Susan Hawkins, your nominee. When you wake up on November the 5th and realize that she's the only person who won in Dallas County as a Republican, are you going to wonder how long it's going to take her to switch back to Democrat? She's done it twice before. You have every indication that she's going to do it again. Or are you going to go with the guy who got fired for being a Republican, for standing on principles, for standing on integrity, for standing for something that he believes in? You're not going to have that worry with me. You're going to have the faith that I can do the job well. You're going to have the faith that everything's going to hopefully turn around in Dallas County. And I can't promise that. But I can promise that Ron and I are going to work very hard to make sure that we make a difference in Dallas County and make it better than the way we found it. Now again, I don't think that's going to be that hard if we get Craig Watkins out of office. We can do some great things to the district attorney's office to make you feel safe, to make you understand that when somebody does something to you, when somebody violates the rules, breaks the law, that you're going to have somebody there backing you. We affect y'all probably more on a day-to-day basis than you realize. Everybody's concerned with Ted Cruz and concerned with President Obama, but hey, you get jury notices. You have to drive downtown. You might have your car broken into. Your neighbor might have their house broken into. Maybe you have a family friend who's charged with a crime. Maybe you have a victim in your family. I've worked long enough as a prosecutor to know that we're all touched by criminal justice in Dallas County. We want somebody who understands that, who's willing to go to bat for you guys, who's willing to make a change and make a difference so that you guys can feel safe and your families can feel safe. So, Ron mentioned it. We need your support. We need your financial support. It costs a lot to run a race, so please, anything that y'all can donate and give at this time is much appreciated. The website, as I tell people, is it's easy enough for an Aggie to remember. As I mentioned, I'm Polish and an Aggie. Those two things cancel each other out. Makes me the smartest man in this room. But it's easy enough for an Aggie to remember, votingfortom.com. Okay? So it rhymes. You know, y'all should be singing the tune after I'm walking out of here. Voting for Tom. I appreciate y'all going, putting it on Facebook, getting on Twitter, whatever it is that you do. We always talk about a younger generation in Republican circles and what we need. That's me. I got the cool billboard type, name tag. We got young people who are becoming engaged, and we just need to change it and let them believe that we can win. And if we all work together for that, we won't have any problems. These meetings are going to be filled to the brim with young people who are excited about what we represent and doing things the right way. So I appreciate y'all's support. Thank y'all so much for coming out. Thank y'all for spending your nights learning, and thank y'all very much. God bless.
About 10 minutes for questions. If any of you have any questions for either Ron or Tom. Ross?
For both of you guys, or either one, do you know what the distribution is of registered voters in Dallas County between Republicans and Democrats? Like what
numerical distribution, or
just percentage-wise, what's the percentage of registered voters, Republican versus Democrat in Dallas County? You mentioned earlier there's...
right? If you're talking real or live voters, there's marginally. I mean, it's almost a 50-50.
It's almost 50-50. Okay.
So this is really a campaign too for voter registration, just in order to improve those statistics.
Well,
50-50 is that's
right. And voter ID has been rather controversial, but I'll tell you, voter ID, the way it's been implemented, no disrespect to the legislature, because it was a big step to get that in place. But what they need to do is come back and deal with mail-in ballots in some way, because that's the bulk of where the Democrats, they go to the, they farm the neighborhood, whatever they do to get the ballots, and people always know who they're voting for. But I think if you look back historically, even the last election cycle, where we did in the presidency, if you look at the number of people that voted there in those races, if we could have got people to go down ballot, we would have reclaimed a lot of the seats that are currently in Democrat hands.
So you're saying, based on turnout, if people would have voted down ballot, you're saying it would have turned out differently?
Correct, absolutely. Well, two things. If you go down ballot, and and we need to set our differences aside, because all of us, whether we're this way conservative or this way conservative, we're far better than not going to the polls. I've been at meetings where people have stood up and said, well, unless my guy or my gal gets it in the primary, and the other guy, I don't agree with him, or I don't like, the other gal, so I'm just not going to vote. And all you're doing at that point is just empowering the Democratic Party. And that's, that's not going to help us.
Well, when I started this race, I actually started calling the precinct chairs. I will tell you, there have been, I'm surprised that they admitted this to me, but there have been a couple precinct chairs who told me that they voted for Craig Watkins in the last election. So the idea that we have Republican precinct chairs who are voting for Craig Watkins as a Democrat is, crazy to me. So I educated them, and I gave them as much information as I could so they wouldn't make that mistake again. But those kinds of things happen. Now, Coppell is great in terms of we have great numbers here, and for us here at Coppell, it's a matter of turnout. I will say Coppell could have won the election for Danny Clancy a few years ago. And what I always tell people is this: take one person. I mentioned earlier some of our Democrat friends. If you take that person who's kind of on the fence, who doesn't normally go vote, with you to go vote, they are statistically something like 90% likely to vote the same way that you are if you mention a couple races to them. Now, I'm not saying you have to convince them to go straight ticket voting if they don't do that normally, but they are statistically more likely to do so. And if you mention a few races to them, they will vote that way. So take that friend, take that person who you know falls into that category, and I can almost guarantee if you take them to the primary, Republican primary, they'll be Republican voters come November. So it's all a matter of just doing that +1, that friend that we can take, and we have it. We have it here in the city to win in all of Dallas County. Now, I love Coppell, and I know the means are here. I'm not expecting y'all to get that extra $5,000 for us. But we're going to do everything we can to help, and we're going to do everything we can to move that along, and all over Dallas County. And I think, the race could swing very close, or we can win. If we get the same people to vote who voted in the last election, this presidential election, we win in a landslide. The Republicans increased their straight ticket voting by 1% in the last election. That's another 8,000 votes. So if we get those same people to come out and vote, the numbers are going to be very, very good for us. So again, just get the same people who voted last November to come out next November, and we're set.
Well, let me, another thing, you hear a lot about the Democrats are, turning Dallas County blue and it's never going to turn back. A couple things happened. When Katrina hit down in New Orleans, if you look at the election after that, there was a spike in Democrat voting. Okay? Because they came up here, people left New Orleans, and unfortunately, they came here as Democrats. We didn't check their ID at the border before we let them in. And then the following election, you had the Obama, episode take place. Since then, if you look, the actual number of Democrats that are showing up at the polls is dropping off. So, % or two going up with the Republicans, the Democrats. There's really not a lot. and you may have heard this, Charles Lingerfeld, there was a little bit of a debate with Charles because he was going to challenge Eddie Bernice Johnson. And people within the party talked him out of it. And you might question, why would you talk a Republican out of running against Eddie Bernice Johnson? Well, because we don't want to motivate her voters. We don't need another 5,000 or 10,000 of her people to go to the polls. What we want them to think is, there's no reason, she doesn't have an opponent, I don't need to go to the polls, I'll go, spend my food stamp money at the grocery store or whatever, on election day. So you don't want to motivate them. So there is a little bit of strategy behind why you would leave a seat like that empty. Now, it doesn't mean that the Republicans, of which there are 24% in her district, that you don't want them to go to the polls. You want them to go to the polls. You want them to vote for us. Tim.
Is Elba Garcia being challenged, or is there a strategic reason not to challenge her?
So far, nobody has stepped up to challenge her.
I'm going to say that.
But there's not been a strategic reason why not to challenge her.
I will say that Craig Watkins is getting in a little bit of hot water with his own parties because he's running a lot of Democrat judges against incumbents. Now, Susan Hawk was an incumbent Democrat judge, and she ended up getting an opponent supported by Craig and Craig's wife, who was a former, campaign consultant for Susan. And so a lot of the Democrat judges in Dallas County now are facing opponents that are supported by Craig Watkins. So there's a bit of infighting in terms of the party and in terms of them not being happy and pleased with the actions of the district attorney. So as I mentioned earlier, you talk to Democrats, you talk to people, they're not going to vote for Clay, they're not going to vote for Craig in terms of this election. So the numbers are there, folks. I promise you. Everybody doesn't need to have a fatalistic attitude about Dallas County. Just they're there. We just need to get people to the polls and have that sense of this is going to happen and we are going to win. And so that's what we're about. That's why we're going as many meetings as we can to get that message out. So we appreciate your support.
Who else? Yes, sir.
Are the county commissioners district?
Yes.
Showing like this.
Yeah, the commissioners are. My race is countywide. So you've got 4 commissioners that are divided up amongst over the county over. And the judge is in that large position. Now the other thing about, I was talking earlier about, well, there's only going to be 2 Republicans down there, so gee whiz, gloom and doom. But the county judge sets the agenda. And remember, the commissioner's court controls the sheriff's budget. I don't know anybody in this room that probably likes our sheriff right now. You can't really direct the sheriff, but you can control the dollars. You can control the dollars for the jail, for the district attorney. All those things are controlled by the commissioner's court. And I always learn, he who controls the gold controls, so there's other ways that you can subtly influence what you want to get done in some of these other positions. Well, thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
I pass them around a clipboard. If y'all want to get active, give me your email and sign up for yard sign or whatever. It sure helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ross Kessig.
Hello, for those who don't know me, my name is Ross Kessig. I live in Valley Ranch, so I'm in Coppell ISD in Irving. It's kind of in that no man's land area. But I volunteered to help out the club with legislative alerts. So I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I don't want to talk real long. I kind of want to ask questions, but I want to talk about a lot of stuff that you guys may not have as much interest in. I'll put some of this information on the website for the club. What the club wanted or recommended I cover was the results of the constitutional amendments, pro-life update, the state law that was passed that's now been challenged, portions of law have been challenged in the courts, recent updates on the impact of Obamacare, and then the local debt propositions that was put on November 5th ballot along with the constitutional amendments. So one of the things I like to talk about is local debt. And there's good reason for that. The state of Texas has the 2nd highest per capita local debt in the nation. The only state that beats us in debt, local debt per capita, is the state of New York. And a lot of people don't know that. The state comptroller put out a series of reports highlighting these issues last year in 2012, and you can go to texastransparency.org and read all about that. So the 2 types of local governing districts that hold most of our debt are municipalities and school districts. each are about $30-some billion for a total of $60-some billion, which is about a third of all outstanding state and local debt. So this last ballot, the November 5th ballot that had the constitutional amendments, had about $6.7 billion of debt propositions on the ballot, which would be about a 10% increase in the total amount of local debt. I think about $1 billion of that, maybe a little over that, was defeated. Most of the time they carried. And obviously there's some justified debt incurrences, debt propositions on local ballots, but what you'll find is a lot of times these pass pretty easily because a lot of people don't know they're on the ballot. And there's local voter turnout in local elections, so it's nice to have candidates here at the county level talking about the importance of turning out in elections and paying attention to local stuff, because here in Texas there's some major glaring fiscal issues that I think people need to be aware of. So I just wanted to cover the statistics on local debt. All of the constitutional amendments, there were 9 passed. The most contentious one that you probably heard the most about was Prop 6, which is a funding mechanism created, taking $2 billion out of the rainy day fund, putting it into a funding mechanism that will, in a variety of ways, finance capital expenditures for water infrastructure projects already in the state waters plan. How that's spent will be at the discretion of an existing board, the Water Development Board. Obviously, a lot of that was going to be used to finance more local debt. So that proposition passed. I think it was 70-some% passed. So I don't want to go into a whole lot of other detail. I guess what I should do is ask you guys questions. If any of those topics you have questions about, the constitutional amendments, the pro-life update, the legal battle, there's a couple parts of that law that's being challenged, and anything related to Obamacare or the local debt topic. So, do you guys have any questions? Matt?
Can you explain, we've heard a lot about pro-Prop 6 and anti-Prop 6, but a lot of people didn't, I don't think, understand how, can you explain how Prop 6 was used to circumvent having to vote to bust the state spending cap?
Okay, so correct me if anyone wants to correct me, but the way I understand it to work is that the money in that funding mechanism, the spending that results from it won't count towards the state spending cap. Critics of Prop 6 had argued that if water infrastructure spending was so important, it should have been addressed in the budgetary process. This year, the legislature brought in record revenues, had a record surplus of about $8 or $9 billion on top of what they budgeted. And so critics of Prop 6 were saying, if we need to appropriate money to capitalize the funding of water projects, why wasn't this a contentious issue in the budget discussion? Why didn't we utilize funds from the surplus instead of asking the voters to approve us using funds out of the rainy day fund, which originally wasn't intended really to be used in that way? It's supposed to be an emergency relief fund or make up for years when we have budget shortfalls. So that's what critics had said of Prop 6, passing Prop 6. Other people in the legislature, when this was being debated, were wanting more transparency measures. They wanted expenditures as a result of the funding mechanism created by Prop 6 to be posted online so that people would see how the funds were being spent, and a lot of those types of measures were shot down. Other people, like I know Van Taylor, had said that this solution didn't address the non-fiscal issues that are restricting local projects from moving forward in a more timely manner. There's a state permitting process. Of course, there's the EPA that tries to control what we do with our land and our natural resources. But there's a state permitting process that's very lengthy and encumbering, and is taking 10 or 12 years for projects that are applying for permits to actually be able to get through that approval process and move forward with projects. So Prop 6 or the results of the whatever was done during the legislative session didn't do anything to improve the regulatory environment and streamline that process. So there's people disappointed with that. But in terms of Matt's question, hope that answers your question.
I was actually thinking of, they had the votes to pass the rainy day funding in the legislature, correct?
Yes.
But by sending it to the voters and funding the PAC that would support the proposition, they didn't have to vote to bust the state spending cap, correct?
That's correct.
So those are the two options.
Yeah, that's correct. Any other questions about these topics?
A little clarification on the transparency, you said it was shot down on transparency. Why would that be?
Ron Simmons introduced an amendment. This was just one of the more notable ones, I guess. Other people in North Texas, like Giovanni Capriglione, had outwardly supported it. There's a lot of transparency proposals that were shot down in the legislature. I guess you have to ask representatives who voted against those measures what the rationale is. We're not having greater transparency in the government expenditures. Susan Combs had championed, who's the state comptroller, has done a lot to try to clarify how government is spending your money, both at the state and local level. She's the one I was saying that issued those series of reports I was citing. There was HB 14 was voted down by a lot of Republicans who have a near supermajority in the House. It would have actually changed or required that districts trying to issue these debt propositions on ballots, like what I had talked about earlier, provide more information to voters. So instead of just saying, you know, Coppell ISD wants to borrow $80 million, or whatever it is, it wanted them to have to state what's the existing debt of the district. You know, what's the projected interest cost going to be to taxpayers in addition to the principal that you're going to borrow? So what's the total cost to taxpayers? Certain measures like that, just to give voters more information, require them that they put it on the ballot instead of having more ambiguous language that doesn't really give anyone a relative measure about what the fiscal impact of that proposition is going to be. Those things were voted down. I know there's a lot of, there's maybe certain governing districts that don't want greater transparency, you know, on the ballot for voters to see because they want to make it easier. Because obviously, if there's more information given out to voters, there's going to be either more debate about it or potentially more opposition. And so there was a lot of people that lobbied against those types of measures and put pressure on officials to not have those transparency measures go through. I'm sure there's a variety of other reasons.
One of the reasons, and because I've kind of followed that, one of the reasons is because the government definition of transparency is somewhat convoluted, and instead of having a succinct piece of information about a proposition that's going to be on the ballot, it could turn out to be a one-page, full page of information in 8 font. And regardless of how many times you put that in the paper, nobody's going to read it.
Well, I think the idea is that to make the information available, and I mean, because clearly you don't want 6 pages of, you know, this document for people to go to the polls and.
But that's what the literally the ballot language would have had to have been, and I don't know if it's the one that you're talking about, but one of the options would have literally been 2 pages of information to describe what the actual thing is before you vote. So instead of a 7-page ballot, you might have a 29-page ballot.
Are you talking about Susan Combs? That just had that was the proposition with the website. Basically, you would put the bond issue information on the website. That didn't deal with that.
Well, hers had lots of different things in it, and that was just one of them. But there was, I don't know exactly whose did what, but there were some of them that were very onerous.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that there was no change to how these, to what is, you know, required to appear on the ballot, other than very basic information. So, yeah, okay. So obviously something's, you know, that would push for something very convoluted. Maybe another reason for that. But is there any other questions about the local debt, Obamacare, pro-life legislation that the legislature passed, or constitutional amendment? Or anything else? Anything else you guys want to talk about while we're here? Okay, that's it.
It's like a